life is cruel in the sense that no matter how good you get, no matter how good a fighter you get, it's going to degrade. Your health's going to degrade. Your mind's going to degrade. Your skills are going to degrade. We do everything in our power to slow that process down, but it's going to happen. Always keep in mind that concept of continuous self-improvement. No matter what happens, the idea is that you try to become better than you were the day before. Even if you're losing ground, you still try to become better than you were the day before. That effort can never stop, because the day you stop, then what was the point of all of that before then? Right? Did you waste your time? And just because you can't be number one, you quit? What was the point?
Warriors, come out to play.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Warriors Way Home podcast. I'm your co-host Edmund with my boy Travis here. And today we have a very special episode for At the Feet of the Masters. This is our second installment. If you are watching our current series here, we are trying to get to 100 different martial arts teachers, trainers, senseis, as many people as we can get to be able to give us more information about how they're traveling the warrior's path, how they're teaching other people how to do the same, and just their overall experience. So today we actually have my sensei. Our first episode was with Danny Reed that we did. That was Travis's sensei from back in the day. And now we're here with one of my senseis, one of my favorite senseis, one of my longest term tutors and mentors that I've had in the martial arts. Please welcome JD Alexander. How you doing today, sir?
Doing well. Thank you very much.
Good. So, with the style that JD predominantly practices is called Kudo Daido Juku, which is coming out of Japan, and I will actually let him give us a little bit of history behind that.
So Kudo Daido Juku is a Japanese mixed martial art. It has its roots in a couple of different martial arts, originally derived from Kyokushin karate. The founder of Kudo, Takashi Azuma, was one of the original students of the founder of Kyokushin, Masoyama. And essentially he took that Kyokushin foundation and he combined it with his other backgrounds in the judo world, as well as some boxing he had done when he was in the army, and kind of created a more integrated martial art that covers more of the complete fighting distances from a open-handed point of view in the martial arts world. It's continued to evolve over time. The philosophy behind Kudo is the way of the open mind. So the idea is it should be continuously evolving and adapting as the world progresses and as techniques continue to improve and evolve. Training methodologies train and improve and evolve. And one of the big points in the history of Kudo where we saw a lot of innovation in the art, if you will, is when they opened the very first Kudo school outside of Japan, which was in Russia. Oh, wow. And those Russian schools were combat sambo schools. So what ended up happening is they took the techniques from combat sambo, particularly a lot of like the wrestling style techniques, takedowns, and methodologies, and those ultimately got integrated into the art of Kudo as well.
Is that kind of why you see some of the matching with the gis and some of the cohesiveness with that? Because
absolutely,
I did notice that. I've never looked into Kudo before I met Edmund, and then I started looking into it, and I was like, oh. Start seeing Kudo, and then in some of the same when you're watching the videos for Kudo, right after that you start seeing sambo.
Yeah, you sure do, and there's a lot of commonality between the two arts. The fact that you're fighting in a gi is one of those. For combat sambo and Kudo both, headbutts are allowed, elbows are allowed, pretty much all your striking is allowed. Of course, you have your clinch work, your takedowns, and your grappling on the ground. So that's kind of the cohesiveness of the martial art.
Nice. Was Kudo was that your first venture into martial arts, or what was your first venture?
It was not. So my original martial art back when I started, when I was in the single digits in age, around 6 years old, was actually Kyokushin karate. So that's what I started as. I did that pretty much all the way through high school. When I went off to college, there was no Kyokushin school around. So I kind of, looked around, saw what was available. I got into a MMA program that was hosted at my university. It wasn't part of the university. The instructor was just using the facilities.
Right.
But I started picking up catch wrestling and Muay Thai in that program with an instructor named Doug Stokes.
Okay.
Really amazing instructor. over the course of that time, I trained there for a few years. I ended up moving to another city and ended up getting into another MMA school with an instructor. My primary instructor for that was Mike Parker. He was another high-level Muay Thai instructor and catch wrestler as well underneath the Combat Submission Wrestling organization.
Yeah.
And so I did that for several more years. Once I graduated university, I ended up getting into my proper day job career.
Mhm.
Ended up getting sent off to Dayton, Ohio. When I got to Dayton,
The Vegas of the country.
right, absolutely,
The Paris of the Midwest.
Yeah, good old Dayton, good old Dayton. But when I got there, I actually got back involved in Kyokushin karate after all that time. There's an instructor there in Columbus, Ohio, Shihan Benalio Padron. Started training with him. And then ultimately, he's the one who kind of turned me on to Kudo.
Okay.
Even though he's not part of Kudo, we knew Azuma Jukucho was coming to the United States,
Mhm.
and he was doing a seminar at that time in Detroit, because that was where the first real Kudo school got established in the U.S.
Okay.
And so we made that journey up from Dayton to Detroit. Not a big trip, it was relatively close for us, and kind of got involved in that way.
Nice.
And kind of once I saw Kudo and I saw that essentially there was a martial art that still had that traditional Budo background,
Mhm.
but included all the different fight distances, I was like, oh, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
So I kind of got involved there. And up to that point in my life, one of the big gaps in my skill sets was I'd always done catch wrestling.
Yeah.
So it was all no-gi stuff. And
Oh,
so
yeah,
now
yeah.
I'm starting to grapple on the ground in a gi, and it's like, oh man,
It's way different.
stop grabbing me. So I ended up getting into some jiu-jitsu on the side at another place there in Dayton called the Tim Bears MMA Academy.
Okay.
Great instructor there. And started picking up the jiu-jitsu a little bit, learning to fight in the gi, and kind of integrating all that together. That's
Sweet.
ultimately the same time probably me and Ed first met. I opened up a little club there in Dayton, Ohio, in the multi-purpose room of a bodybuilder's gym. It was awesome. You had
Yep.
us in there like
Yep.
beating each other
That's
up,
how you
and you
do it.
have all these
That's the
these big
start.
bodybuilders walking around flexing in the
Come
mirrors.
here.
Yeah, come play with me, please.
Yeah, exactly.
They
Come here,
never
big
did.
man. I want the big one.
They never did. They never did. No, it was a great environment. That was an awesome gym and a good opportunity. So
Awesome, man. From that's funny. From Japan to Russia
yeah,
to Detroit.
that's right.
I was like,
That's right.
I was like, that's okay. That's a journey right there.
That's right.
But man, yeah, Kyokushin seems to have. I notice a lot of people tend to have their beginning in Kyokushin a lot of times, or at least have some relation to it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Masayama did a really good job spreading Kyokushin globally.
Oh yeah.
And so you have a lot of schools that have existed for a long time, and they did a pretty solid job about making sure those schools were of good quality. And so that's why you get a lot of other martial arts and other martial artists that come from that background, because it is a full contact style of karate. So it has a little bit more direct applicability to fighting than some others. But at the end of the day, it's still primarily a striking art. So if you want to go beyond pure striking, that's kind of how you get that genesis of evolution, right? You want to get involved in more of like the wrestling or judo style takedowns. You want to get involved in more of like the grappling and ground aspect of it. Okay, well that's your natural evolution, is something like Kudo or combat sambo as well.
One of my favorite aspects of Kudo is the being able to throw headbutts and elbows, and it's like it
Yep.
still incorporates that trickiness that you can have in the street, but you can still kind of go home at the end of the day without
Yes,
having to
yeah.
face all cut
Yeah.
up and bashed up and whatnot. But how do you balance the like you said, we still incorporate that Budo aspect of it with these more modern training styles? How do you incorporate that in your classes and how you teach the art of Kudo?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of keeping the traditional aspect of it, in my mind, that's more of a mindset and an expectation of behavior. Because the thing in my head, because a lot of what we consider traditional in martial arts are not that terribly old. A lot of the styles of like karate, like Kyokushin karate, okay, it was created in the 1960s. It's
Right.
not that
True.
old.
True.
Kudo came around in 1980. It was called Daido Juku then, but that's even less, right? but it's about keeping that Budo philosophy. It's about keeping that philosophy of respect for you and everyone else. It's about keeping that philosophy of personal self-development as your primary focus, right? You have that concept of like, I'm not trying to be better than anybody. I'm trying to be better than I am today, right? You're constantly trying to push yourself for your own personal growth and benefit. Like, how can I be a better martial artist? How can I be stronger, faster, better technique, a better person, right? And that's really, that mindset is what sets a traditional martial art apart from what I would call just general sport combat.
Right.
You know, sport combat is about just that. It's about competitions. It's about, you know, at the pro level, it's about making money. That's fine. But that is the two primary difference between it. Now, what techniques you practice, it doesn't matter. What matters is the mindset that you practice it in. I would also argue that a traditional martial art is supposed to be about training as a lifestyle, right? Using martial arts as a way of life versus using it as something fun to do or as a career, right? Which nothing wrong with fighting as for a living. That's awesome. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's your driving factor. Because we have a lot of traditional martial artists that have fight careers.
Right.
And then once they're done with their fight career, maybe they don't, they're tired of it. Maybe they, you know, got injured. Maybe they just got older and don't want to do it anymore. They still continue training.
Right.
Right. I mean, I'll pick a very popular example. You got George St. Pierre, right? He's retired from competitive fighting. He still trains all the freaking time because he is a martial artist at the end of the day, and that is his lifestyle. And he'll probably train until the day he dies.
Gotcha.
So,
I remember actually one of the tests that you had held in Ohio right before you moved here to Colorado, and I wasn't doing that great in the actual, like, I had just got my black belt. I just got my black belt in another art, and I took some time off, and I kind of like blew back up to my heavier weight, and I was taking your test, and I wasn't doing that well. But when it was over, you had given me back my like result sheet, and at the bottom of it is that that's exactly what you wrote down was martial arts is supposed to be a part of your life, and I still have that piece of paper because it was a big driving factor for me. Because I thought I was doing better than I was. And then once you were gone now, so I like do everything by myself. And I was like, oh God, like, how am I going to make this work? But that was something that's still stuck with me is, you know, it is supposed to be a part of your life. Through it's a good emotional regulator. It's good for, you know, discipline and self-esteem and all that good stuff.
Right.
With the fighters that you have now, how, because you have a lot of kids that are being able to travel around the world for these type of competitions. Do you train the children the same way that you train the adults as far as like that mindset piece, or how do you manage that? Like people who come into the gym for different things.
So the philosophy and mindset doesn't change. Now, granted, there are, we'll just say there are topics that are not appropriate for children to cover. But in terms of the Budo mentality and philosophy, no, that stays the same. There are differences in training a competitive athlete and someone who is just here to train for self-defense purposes or lifestyle factors, right? The whole idea of personal self-improvement. Because there are some people that will train martial arts their whole life and they will never be at a level where they could compete against other competitive fighters. Okay, it's just what it is. Maybe they don't have the desire. Maybe they don't have the talent. Maybe it's just not anything they're terribly interested in, right? And that's fine. And so there are differences in that. But with that said, you know, the way a martial art like Kudo is and the way I think all martial arts should be is kind of goes back to that idea of continuous self-improvement. When anybody comes in here to train, the idea is to push yourself to what your limit is and then try to surpass that limit. So, and it doesn't matter if you're, you know, you work a desk job during the day or you're a professional fighter preparing for your next big match, right, internationally. Wherever you're at in your journey, that's your limit. Great. You come in here and train that day, try to move it. Try to move that marker just a little bit to the right, right? Try to go beyond a little bit where you're at because that is the process of self-improvement. And
that 2% improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's one of those deals like life's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And we all have stuff comes up. And it could be, like I said, injury. It could be financial. I lost my job. It could be a lot of different things. And so you're going to have setbacks. But the whole point is that you can never stop. You can never give up and just say, well, that's just what it is. My life sucks. I guess I quit. Nope, you can't. No matter how bad the setback is, you start the process over again and you start building back up, right? And you find your limit again and then you push beyond it. My own personal journey, a lot of people know I've blown my knees out 3 times now.
Damn.
3 different surgeries. And, the first time it happened, I was 27. I was at my physical peak. I was competing internationally, was doing very well. And then it was all over like that.
Then life started living.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And it took me a full year of recovery from my first ACL surgery before I was truly functional. I can't even say I was like back to fight shape, but I was functional again. Okay, it took several years to recover from that. And then 7 years later, the same thing. It blew again. The surgery just couldn't, it wore out and it gave out again. So that process starts over again. Okay, now I'm 30, I was 35, I guess then, and we start over again. Well, I made it until I was 39 this year. And then my other knee, right? Luckily not an ACL.
Yeah.
Torn meniscus, way easier to recover.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, way better.
But it's a setback, right? And at any point in that journey, I could have said, well, I can't do martial arts anymore. My knees are blown out. I guess I'll just quit. But that can't be. That can't be. You must continue to push yourself. Otherwise, what are you even doing?
Yeah. It's funny like that. Within probably a few months period, Edmund got injured when he was training, and it was your left or your right leg?
Right here.
Yeah. He was in this room. He was in this room. Blew out an ankle a little bit, and probably maybe within 90 days, I had a 8-car pileup on I-25. It ended up not knowing, because they didn't check until months later, that I have a fully torn labrum in my right shoulder and partially torn rotator cuff.
Which was funny because you were on your way to see me.
Yeah.
So
about that. About that. So you see the problem.
Yeah.
He's his problem and he's my problem. You see this, right?
Yep.
Wait, was he around when this happened too?
He was.
Oh,
He
see,
was. Yep.
you're the
bad luck man.
We have come. We have. He is the juju. He is the juju man. He is the. So you're getting paid, aren't you?
Yeah.
At the table? Yeah. It's like, oh, I know a doctor. I got. Yeah.
Oh, I'm hurt.
Call this. Call this guy. Call this guy. He's great. He helps all my friends.
Yeah.
He helps all my friends. So I heard you mention a part about the sports side of martial arts. One question I usually ask a lot of martial artists is there tends to be a difference between the sports side of martial arts and the tactical self-defense side of martial arts.
Yep.
And I say that because I've seen a lot of guys, I've worked a lot of bars doing security, and a lot of guys come in and they're like, I train MMA. Somehow it comes up in conversation all the time. I have no idea how you can, when somebody asks you what you want to drink, how you end up mentioning that you fight MMA. I have no idea. It's like, all he asked you was, do you want Sprite? But somehow it comes up. But and then, something ends up happening and I see them get into an actual fight and it does not go the way they think it's going to go. Because there are no rules in the street. There are no rules in the bar. Just because, somebody's not going to not kick you in the groin or not elbow you in the face or whatever it may be. In reality, it's just not going to happen like that. And I see a lot of guys, it can almost be to the point where they train in such a way so much that they, there's a saying, you always fall to the baseline of your training.
Yep.
And I see some guys who, certain things come up in their training and they actually try and do that in real life, and it turns out terribly for them. Like they, you're used to pulling a punch. I had a sensei who was always say, don't pull your punch. Because if you do that here, you're going to do that out there. He said, you're going to do this and not finish off the technique. Is like, when you get somebody down, finish off the technique. Because if you don't, then you have a problem. Because you're going to, and half-ass it out here, and then they're going to get you. I've seen a lot of guys kind of go through that. It seems like there's a different kind of mentality I've noticed with Kudo, where because you train with elbows and you can use a lot more of the techniques that you would actually probably use out on the street. Most of the time, you probably wouldn't punch somebody with your fist. Most of the time, you're mostly going to break your hand. Yes, you're going to use elbows, you're going to use kicks, you're going to use knees, you're going to use certain types of things. It seems like there's a kind of a different type of mentality when it comes to Kudo versus, let's say, and I studied freestyle karate before, versus like a karate fighter in a bar versus a Kudo fighter in a bar.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start that with the way the sport of Kudo was designed was to get as close as is reasonably possible to a real fight. Now, there's still safety factors involved, right?
Yeah, he told me I couldn't stomp the groin, and I was very upset.
So you say that, but
20 kilos.
in a Kudo fight, if there is a weight difference of more than 20 kilos between the two fighters, groin attacks are absolutely allowed. Now, generally speaking, you can't stop it, but you can kick it. Now, generally speaking, it's sort of like a gentleman's agreement that no one takes advantage of it, but it is perfectly legal.
So since I'm not a gentleman,
then you could perfectly do it, and it would be allowed, absolutely. But as you say, because for the most part, because we wear the big space helmet, which is a safety factor, of course, but the reason we're wearing it is because it allows us to get away with doing all those techniques without breaking our faces all to pieces, right? The fact that we're knee into the head and elbowing to the head and headbutting and all this stuff, without the helmet, it would not be great. Even combat sambo, right? They wear the big boxer's headgear with cheek guards for that same reason, right? And even they, because there is some openings in that, will get cut up pretty often. But that's okay. I mean, they're taking something in consideration.
Yeah.
The other factor that I would say brings it closer to what most people are going to experience in a real fight is the fact that we are wearing clothes, right? Nothing against MMA. It's a great sport and I love it. But the fact that you are bare-chested is not terribly realistic. Not saying you couldn't get in a fight and, someone who knows what they're doing, they're going to take their shirt off. And there's a reason for that too.
So I guess we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Sure. Right. Yeah. Truth. I mean,
you want to fight?
In all fairness, if I thought I was going to be in a one-on-one match with a guy, I probably would, because that's one less handle you have on me. Yeah. But that's not how real fights typically evolve either. It's like you said something, somebody takes a swing, and it's on.
Yeah. See, I usually take my pants off.
I mean, that is definitely that is a psychological factor. Yes, absolutely.
Now you've been mindful.
And now you have a flashing charge.
But I want to fight.
So that
you'll be fighting in jail.
And how disgraceful is that?
You
want to get the naked
pants
guy.
off.
Right.
Yeah.
So was top naked or bottom naked?
Right.
Bottom naked. Oh, you got bottom bunk.
All right. By default.
But so that's a factor that I think brings it closer to reality. The other thing, which a lot of people actually critique, which is fair, but the way a Kudo match works, with boxing, with kickboxing, with MMA, there are rounds. And usually what ends up happening a lot of times, especially at the higher skill levels, is that first round, especially the first few minutes of a round, the fighters fill each other out. Right? They check distance, they play with the jab, they play with distance, and they get a feel for the timing of their opponent. And then maybe later into the round or into the next round, they'll really start picking up the pace and trying to execute their plan. Not always, but that's generally what happens.
Right.
The way Kudo works is when a round is over, if someone is ahead, fight's over, they win. So what that forces is the pace.
Right.
You can't afford to spend the time feeling out your opponent. You have to go, and you have to go now. And so that forces the action, and it ultimately it turns into more of a brawl, which is closer to a real fight. Real fights just they're not kickboxing matches, right? They're just not. So that's a piece of the puzzle where we, of course, when we talk about real fights versus sport combat, as you say, there are no rules in a real fight. And so I would say I chalk that up to what I call chaos factor. Real fights have an unmeasurable amount of possibilities, from, the whole multi-man scenario where I've got more than one person jumping me. You've got the weapons factor, from what we traditionally consider a weapon, knives, guns, etc., to non-traditional weapons, a pool stick,
Beer bottles.
a beer bottle, a stool, right? They're all really good weapons, especially, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's funny, but for sure,
I've seen it.
if somebody shoves the bystander in me, yeah.
Guy that gets thrown.
Yep. Because you're in it now. So those are all factors that, you know, I would say I don't want to call it a shortcoming of the martial arts world. It's just a reality. Because we can talk about it, we can run scenarios, we can practice strategic things, but you can never simulate it. Not really. We can never simulate a fight in the dojo because everybody get hurt, right? Because that's how real fights happen. And we can never bring it to 100% reality. You can only experience that in a real fight. And so with an art like Kudo, we get it as close as we reasonably can. But there's always that point where it's like, yeah, but there's still that gap, right? 20%. There's that 10, 20%, right? That we can't quite get to. No martial art can, because at the end of the day, it's just not realistic, right? And so that's when you see people who are probably very competent, trained fighters getting the bar fight, if you will. And it just doesn't go. That's because they've never been in a fight before. They've been in lots of combat sport matches. They've sparred. They've fought in the ring, which, the ring is great. And I will put my money on a highly trained fighter over Joe Average any day of the week. But a ring is a controlled environment, right? It is a clean environment, usually, meaning there are no obstacles in the way. There are no other people. It's also two guys that have probably spent the last few months training for this specific purpose, right? They are going to shake hands and bump fists right before the match starts, and then it's go time. Right. Everybody is mentally, physically prepared, emotionally prepared for this bout. That's not how real fights happen. Real fights happen because two guys made a bet, and he walks up and cold clocks you when you're not looking. And now you're either unconscious on the floor, or at the very least, you're in a fight now because it wasn't your choice. That's harsh reality.
The rounds that we use for Kudo remind me of like that Kyokushin principle of like that one hit, one kill. It's like you only have 2 to 3 minutes to get it done. Because in a real life scenario, there might be a second attacker, and you need to conserve that energy tank to be able to move out or run away after it's done, or wherever the scenario ends up being. So one of the opportunities that I took while I was injured, like once I was able to kind of start moving around again, is I started teaching classes up in Denver for a little bit. So it was like small kids, some adults, that kind of thing, and I was trying to remember a lot of what I thought was applicable to these different types of groups. And as somebody who wants to teach eventually, like you've been actually helping me get those kind of skills up over the course of our time together. What is the biggest misconception, or one of the biggest misconceptions that people, like when they wanted to teach the martial arts, that kind of comes up on a regular that you would recognize?
Yeah, so this will be a little bit of a personal opinion thing, but what I see in a lot of instructors, especially ones that are just starting out, they get a little too caught up in like formulaic teaching styles. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a carbon copy of themselves, right? I will kind of pick on some of the more like traditional karate styles in particular on this, especially when it comes to like kata and forms. Because there was a while there where I had a little bit of exposure to some of that, and it was a matter of like you would do the form and the instructor would come up and move you by like a quarter of an inch. Like, that's okay, but maybe my body doesn't move that way. We have a different frames. We have different levels of mobility. I'm just not built the same as you. And also from a practical fighting point of view, did that quarter of an inch do anything? Probably not. That's the harsh reality. Fighting's much more chaotic than that. So that's a piece of the puzzle, right? You're trying to create that carbon copy of you, or what you think of as the ideal martial artist, right? Versus looking at the individual and saying, okay, this person excels in these areas. I should probably dedicate a lot of the time for this person developing those areas they excel at. And then you also look at, okay, well, what are their weaknesses? Where do they no good at? Okay, we should probably spend some time on those weaknesses too. Maybe not developing the techniques. Like, let's say there was one student I had who was a competitive powerlifter for most of his life. Okay, and so when he started martial arts, seriously, he was probably in his 40s. Okay. And when I say competitive powerlifter, he has like the current deadlift record for his weight division for the state of Colorado. He's extremely strong.
Okay.
Downside to being a competitive powerlifter. Yep. Your joints are locked out, baby. And it's particularly his hips. Yeah, particularly his hips were extremely tight. Kicking was never going to be his thing. He could stretch from now until the end of time, and he's never going to be a Taekwondo black belt or whatever, right? He's just not going to be that guy. Low kicks, fine. Anything above the waist, maybe not. Yeah, he's not going to be throwing a lot of head kicks.
Destroy your knees.
So I'm not going to spend the majority of his training time teaching him head kicks. We might eventually get there, but it was much more beneficial like teaching him how to box, developing those low kicks, teaching him how to clinch fight. Because let me tell you, a dude who can deadlift over 1,000 pounds, when he grabs you, you're grabbed. Okay, he grabs you, and you're there. You're not. Yeah. Right. One of my stories from one of my stories from grappling with him, because a guy like that, their grip strength is so powerful. And he had just grabbed my forearm to control. We weren't doing anything crazy. We were grappling on the ground. We were doing jiu-jitsu, essentially. By the end of that training session, I went and took my jacket off, and I had deep, deep bruises where each of his fingertips were, where he had just gripped so hard that it had actually damaged the tissue in my arm, just from holding me down.
Wow.
That's it. Nothing crazy. It didn't even hurt at the time, but that's how tight his grip was. So for someone like that, I'm going to teach him how to grapple. I'm going to teach him how to clinch fight. I'm going to teach him how to box because he's a big dude and he's got heavy hands and he's going to be effective at that. But if I tried to teach him the same way I taught everybody else and we focus on, all the techniques, well, there's a whole category of techniques he's never going to be able to do well, but he doesn't have to. Head kicks are not necessary to be an effective fighter. They're a nice to have, not a need. And you could apply that principle to any fighting distance, right? There are nice to have techniques and there are needs.
Hey guys, quick interruption to the episode. Let me tell you about the 8 Inner Gates, our personal growth and self-mastery course that's been showing men just like you how to get unstuck and take their life, relationships, career, or even business to the next level. The same principles that have helped us to find purpose, overcome depression, command respect, dominate in our careers, and become honorable men, we're now sharing with our brothers. So if you want more of this life, you know you're capable of achieving more of this life, and you're tired of just drifting through it, click down in the description of the episode or in the pinned comments and gain access to the first 2 lessons in the course, completely free on us. Click now and begin unlocking the gates blocking your success.
You could give us 5 needs that every fighter should have.
If we're talking about like total fighting.
Yeah, like anybody could, even like powerlifters, ballerina dancers, like whatever. It's something everybody should have.
We'll stick to martial arts because I don't want to get into the whole philosophy behind other competitive athletes. So boxing, I'd say you need to know at least fundamentals of how to throw a punch. If for no other reason than, as you kind of said,
not to break your hand.
Don't break your hand in somebody's face.
Yeah.
Right. But there's also the very real need for, from a boxing perspective, I would say head movement and distance control are really developed at a high level with boxing. And so if somebody does swing on you, can you get out of the way? Right? Can you avoid that punch? Whether it be stuffing it, whether it be slipping it, whether it be stepping out of the punch's range, it doesn't matter, but that's a skill set. I'd also argue you better be pretty good at clinch fighting, meaning grappling while standing, because that I argue that is the most dangerous range that a fight gets into if anybody knows what they're doing.
And it's much more relevant now that everybody and their grandma does MMA
a little bit
now.
Of something, right?
It's like, oh, I do MMA, so I'm just gonna grab. They're just gonna grab you now,
right? Because once you're clenched up, a lot of your ability to avoid is gone
Mhm.
because I got a hold of you now.
Mhm.
So whether I'm punching you, elbowing you, kneeing you, whether maybe you got a guy with a little bit of a wrestling background, he picks your butt up and slams you into the floor. You're not getting up from that most likely. So you better know what to do in that particular scenario.
Mhm.
And then, I would argue that everybody should know at least a little bit of grappling on the ground. The jiu-jitsu community is real big about the whole, like, well, most fights end up on the floor. True. And that's why you should know something. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to know more than the person you're fighting.
Yeah.
And I will go back to like the uniqueness of Kudo. One of the things we emphasize where the sport supports the self-defense philosophy. When a Kudo fight goes to the ground, you have 30 seconds. If
Mm.
by 30 seconds you haven't finished the fight, they're going to stand you back up. Because from a philosophical point of view, there's the reality in a real fight that when it does go to the ground, you need to end the fight.
Yeah.
Whether that's ground and pounding them out, choking them, breaking some limbs, or disengaging it back to your feet.
Yep.
You better get it done.
And then stomping the groin.
Yep, absolutely. Always restart.
Always stomp the groin.
Restomp the groin. So that's just a reality of a real fight.
Yeah.
One, because of the chaos factor.
Mhm.
I got to get it done because I'm at a position where I've lost a lot of my mobility. So if something does happen outside of me and this dude, I probably can't address it effectively because I've lost my mobility of being on my feet.
Fine.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely just personally, I could say where in all my training and training for MMA and different things like that, I realized that my weak point was definitely the jiu-jitsu part. It's like 100%. Is like that, the stand up, the striking, different things like that. I've had enough experience in that where I'm like, okay, I feel extremely comfortable with my feet. You put me on the ground though, and we had an experience when I actually first came here and met you guys, where we were just going and I was like, okay, wasn't expecting to go today. I was like, oh, I'm gonna stop by and just hang out and watch, and yeah, no, it's not happening. I wish
no wallflowers allowed. Everybody's
I should know better by now at this point in my journey. No dojo I've ever been to have I been like, I'm just gonna sit in the corner and watch. That's never happened. So I should have known better. Why I thought that was gonna change this time, I have no idea. Which is probably why I wore what I wore. And hey, my pants were still the dry cleaners. Okay, but yeah. So one experience I had when I was working with you guys, I was actually working with Edmund. And he was like, "Slow down," and I was like, "Look," I said, "Dude, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing." I said, "So I'm just gonna overwhelm you with bullshit." I was like, "I'm fast and I'm strong. That's all I got. That's all I got when I'm down here. I know very minimal techniques on the ground, so I'm just going to use what I have to my advantage and try and get this shit done."
Well, and we talk about fundamental necessary techniques if you want to be prepared for, multiple scenarios.
Yep.
When it comes to grappling portion, I would argue that the ability to hold someone down against their will, so penning.
Yep.
And then the ability to transition to dominant positions. Because how you got to the floor may not have been, you may not have had a say in that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Some dude just grabbed you from behind and threw you on the floor.
Or stripped you or whatever.
But your ability to go from that bad position and then reverse that position and then control that individual, that's more important than any submission, any choke, any armbar in the world. Because if I can control you, I will eventually get you.
Yeah.
Whether that's me ending you or escaping, one and two. Right. But if I don't have control on the ground, good luck. 100 arm bars won't save you if you can't actually control the individual.
Yep. Exactly. For sure. Yeah. It's the more we speak to more martial artists, the mentalities, there's so many similarities to so many arts, and the foundation, like you said, of having those, there are certain techniques that are just foundational that everybody should know, that everybody should be comfortable with.
Yep.
And I think it was, I don't remember who, I think it was Bruce Lee said, I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 techniques. I fear the man who knows one. He's practiced it 1,000 times. So even if you know You just learn that one technique, which is where practice comes into play, because you can't come to Iron Forge and train one day and then go home and never practice that ever again and expect to be able to use that when you need to, whether it be in the ring or whether it be in a situation that you find yourself out in the world. If you don't practice it, you're not going to be able to do it right off bat. It's just not going to happen. But you meet those people who have trained certain things over and over. I've had the experience, I'm sure you guys have, where you're doing something and you end up doing a technique that you weren't planning. Your body just moves.
Yep.
And it's like, I didn't think to do that move. It just, I saw the opening and it just happened. It's like, because you train it so much, so often, that it's become second nature. Your body's just like, oh, there's the opening, boom.
So in the Japanese philosophy, we refer to that as mushin, which means no mind, right? So you do things without conscious thought because you've trained it so many times. You don't have to think; you just act. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. I had an experience. I was at a bar bouncing, and there was an altercation between a guy and a girl I knew her, didn't like her. Wasn't a fan of her. She caused trouble. She caused trouble, which is what this was about. And I guess she was getting into it with him, and I was like, "Look, bro, it's just a woman. It's like it's not that big." Did she put her hands on you? Well, no. It's like, dude, chill out. And I'm talking to both of them. Like I'm looking. She's standing where you are, talking to her, and he's sitting right here. So I'm talking to him, like, "Come on, dude, just chill out." Da 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 da. And I say something to her, and I see him do this, and the next thing I know, my fist is like this, and I'm like, shit. Because I'm literally looking at her, and just out the corner of my eye, I see the shoulder do this. The next thing I know, it's like, and I'm like, damn it, I guess we're fighting now.
Minute now. That's right.
So I'm like, all right, fist, face, we're going. It's happening now. We got to do a fight, because he tried to sucker punch me while I was talking to her.
Yep.
But it was just, there was no punch him now. It was just like, da-da-da. Shit. I was like, what did you do?
Safety as well.
Exactly. I was like, damn it, I forgot to put the safety on. But yeah, it was wild. Like I said, you just get into that aspect where once you live that life and you're in it, so much, you just think of things in a different kind of way. You move a different kind of way than most people do.
Yep.
It's highly amusing.
Well, that idea goes back to the concept of martial arts as a lifestyle too. Like, especially if you're an individual who is learning martial arts for self-defense, well, then you can never stop training, because the skills do dull, right? Not saying that they ever completely go away, but they will dull over time. And if you want to stay sharp, you keep training. It's no different than, you got guys that are really into, firearms, right? And they want to be marksmen, and they want to have the ability to use their weapon effectively. Well, that means going to the range frequently and practicing.
Clean your gun.
Clean your gun. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Know your weapon and know how to use it. That's right.
That's kind of what I'm feeling now, is like, because we're coming up on a year at this point, and I haven't been in the dojo as much, but I'm out in the gym, I'm running and lifting weights and trying to do a lot more like dynamic body weight stuff. But it's the not being able to kick as often as I like, or throwing punches or grappling as much. So it's definitely like that mentality of, all right, if I don't keep this sharp, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it sooner than later. So I'm trying to keep my body up. So it kind of keeps it that way. But as, like you're saying, we have to evolve over whatever the injury is, or whatever the mental stress that we're going through over that day. We have to work through it. How has your mentality with training changed from being a teacher, from going from being a fighter on a regular to being an actual sensei, a teacher, and helping other people maneuver around their bodies?
Yeah, so that one, a couple of things. I would say, one, when I became an instructor, I became way more analytical about what I was doing and how I was doing it. Because as a student, even when I was competitively fighting, at the end of the day, you do what your coach told you to do, right? He told me to practice these techniques. I practiced those techniques, and I did it to my best of my ability at the intensity he wanted from me, because I had trust in my instructors, right? But once you become an instructor, the shoe's on the other foot. Now you're the one having to guide these individuals to the most efficient version of who they can be from a martial arts perspective. And so that's definitely one piece of it. Kind of build on that, the other thing is your focus changes. When you're a student, the focus is on you. All that analysis is going into, okay, how is my body moving? How is my technique? What can I do to improve? When you're an instructor, now all your focus is outward. You're looking at everybody around you and you're analyzing, okay, where's this person at? Where's that person at? What do they need to work on? What do they need to develop? And that mindset change has been probably the most important, and also I would say the most noticeable thing from me, from when I made that switch, when I stopped being the student, if you will, and became an instructor. I will also say that there for a long time, especially when I was a new instructor and still kind of finding my way, it really hurt my martial arts. Becoming an instructor hurt my martial arts because I spent all my mental energy and time making sure everybody else got better around me, and then I didn't have anything for myself.
Right.
And now that's changed over time. I've managed to kind of reach a point of balance to where I'm actually getting where I want to be personally, again, while also, helping everybody around me. And a lot of that comes with, I would say the maturity of the instructor, but it's also been a factor of, when I first started teaching, it was just me. It was me, and it was a bunch of people who didn't know martial arts or weren't instructors.
Right.
Well, now we're, how long have I been teaching martial arts? A long time.
100 years.
Okay, it's something like 13 years of instructing. Well, now I've raised people around me that are extremely competent martial artists, extremely competent fighters, and now that whole burden's not on me. Because at the end of the day, you get the idea, once again, we talk about a Budo martial art versus a combat martial art, is there is an expectation in a traditional martial art that the higher ranks help the lower ranks, right? Not saying that doesn't happen in other gyms of other martial arts, but that's not necessarily the expectation there, because that's more of a purely financial transaction, right? I'm paying you to be taught, and I come to the gym, I get my workout, and I go home. Once again, way of life of martial arts is the idea of you try to raise everybody up, right? There is that social expectation that the black belts will help the lower belts get better and become black belts, right?
So you recently spent time in Japan. Well, first we went to the World Japan tournament last year, and then you spent some time as, like you were saying, just as a student with the, what was that, Japanese team?
So let me pull all that conversation together.
Yeah.
So I talked about how I've been working on trying to find that balance between my growth and then the growth of my students. The trip to Japan in July was definitely me taking some time for my own personal growth, both from a technical point of view and my martial arts, but also, trying to pick up some other teaching techniques from other instructors as well. So what I ended up doing is I went to Japan in July, and they, the Kudo organization over there has a few different summer training camps where it's just all day for multiple days, and all you're doing is training. I was like, perfect. That sounds like good value.
Oh yeah.
So I hit 2 back to back. The first one I did was in the northern part of Japan, and it was a little bit smaller, but I would say it's more of like what you'd see is like, oh, this is like a traditional training camp. We're in an old
hard style.
What was probably like an old World War II era facility, and there was no air conditioning what to speak of.
So the good stuff.
It was awesome. It was awesome. It was also a little bit smaller group. I would say there was maybe 50 people involved in that training camp. So there was a lot more one-on-one attention too, because I would say that there were probably of those 50 people, 10 of them were multiple degree black belts who've been doing this for a very long time, including the current head of Kudo, Osada Juku. And so that was a great camp where you're training all the time and got a lot of experience out of that. The second one I went to was a little bit outside of Tokyo, and a much bigger camp in terms of numbers. We had probably 150, maybe 200 people at that camp. Now granted, more instructors too. And so that kind of comes with it. But another good experience where I got to basically pick the brains and see the teaching styles of all these different instructors of the art.
Variety.
And you see the differences, right? Because everybody's got their own methods, right? that's one thing I really appreciate about Kudo and the concept of way of the open mind is there are no hard rules, right? Other martial arts that are kind of get stuck in a rut where it's like, no, it must be done this way and in this order and in this
No evolution.
no evolution whatsoever because this is how we've done it for 1,000 years. Okay, but
Even though we don't use swords anymore.
right, exactly. Okay, but your methods are based on a reality that doesn't exist anymore. And so in Kudo, there is that freedom. And so you'll get some guys that, when they instruct, you can obviously tell it's definitely leaning more towards that traditional lean. And then you got other guys that when they teach, you see a little bit more what we'll consider modern training methodology come out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's cool. Right. Because you can, cherry pick from everybody.
Yeah.
Only steal from the best. Right.
Exactly.
And so that's what that trip was all about was for my own personal development and growth. And that was one of the ways that I try to balance that out in my own life.
Nice.
Cool.
So one thing we talk about is, especially with a lot of guys, and I'm loving the fact that you added that aspect about the difference between the instructor and when you're the student, how all of your focus goes away from you. And a lot of times you can almost lose yourself in teaching everybody else. The fact where you put yourself last, and by the end you don't have time or energy for yourself at the end. A lot of guys seem to fall into that aspect just in their lives in general. A lot of times, not to say that women don't have that go on or anything like that, but it's almost one of those things where it almost seems like an expectation for a lot of guys to sacrifice themselves for their family, for their work, for their goals, whatever it may be. And it's like by the time you come to the end of that, a lot of times you see some guys who are just empty husks by the end of that. So I think that's a huge factor. How would you say having a martial arts practice plays into a man having something for himself? Okay, because I know controversial.
Right. No,
Trigger alert.
So I have a day job.
Yeah.
I work, 40 hours a week, and that's one thing in my life. When I started teaching martial arts, the thought was I was only going to teach 3 days a week.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. For anybody out there considering opening a martial arts school, it will never be that way ever. Here's the harsh reality. Bills got to be paid. Okay. So
every month too.
The school can never be closed.
They're very
Right?
needy, these bills.
Right. And so that quickly evolved into 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and now 6 days a week that I teach. I can't say that it's contributed to me not being a husk of a man because it does eat up more of my time and energy.
Yeah.
Right. So I won't lie. I'll tell you, like being the martial arts school owner has increased the difficulty on that whole work-life balance.
Yeah.
Because now this becomes a job.
Yeah.
Right. It takes energy and effort. I mean, the fun part is the martial arts training, but now there's all the other, taxes,
bills, the office
bills.
work,
Yeah, I got administration
employees.
stuff. I got records to keep now.
Yeah.
Oof, that's time.
Yeah. Oh, I
Right?
know. Yeah, been there.
But I think the gist of your question
Yeah.
is how do we find that balance in life?
Mhm.
Right. And I will say, yes, there is definitely, especially in Western culture, maybe even globally, that there is an expectation, right?
Yeah.
Even today, with all the ways our society is starting to evolve and change, the expectation is still ultimately, most of the time, it is the man's responsibility to provide for his family.
Yep.
Now that has changed a little bit with the way, obviously women entering the workforce more has changed that a little bit, and will continue to evolve. But fundamentally, even if it's not, a lot of times too, that expectation is in the man's head too.
Yes.
Right.
I think it starts there.
It starts there.
Or
Ultimately.
it's planted there sometimes.
It is. It is. I mean, socially, that's how we are raised to be.
For sure.
And I think just from quality of life, I'm not even saying that you shouldn't have that a consideration, but it can't be the only consideration.
Yeah.
I have a thing that I do say quite a bit, and I didn't make it up, but it's that concept of you cannot care for others if you do not take care of yourself. Because once you've become that husk of a person, you're out of shape. Your body's weak. Your mind is weak. How can you provide for anybody?
How can you protect
Right?
anybody?
How can you protect anybody?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there has to be a balance. we talk about work-life balance. Okay. You need time, and this is the hard part of life. Oh, it's the hard part of life. You got to work.
Yeah.
You got
Until I
to
find that sugar mama,
right.
then I can just do martial arts all day.
Oh, you wish. That is just another factor. Because here's the thing: there's time you need and should.
Yeah.
It's family time.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
I mean, if for no other reason, it is part of your mental health.
Mhm.
Right? Spending quality time with your family is part of what keeps you a healthy, energetic individual.
Yeah.
As long as you love your, loved ones. Now, if you don't, that's a different problem.
He didn't say, he didn't say like, he said love.
You gotta love them.
You don't have to
love
like them.
Yep.
But you do gotta love
will
them.
not always love your family or
yeah.
like your family,
Yeah.
but you gotta love
You
them.
got a responsibility to
That's
love
right.
them.
That's right. But then there's also the time for yourself.
Yeah.
There's the time to recharge, rest. Rest is extremely important, and it is where I fail the majority of the time, but is absolutely required.
Mhm.
Physical rest, mental rest, emotional rest.
Yeah.
You have to have it. But then you need things like, hey, are you eating right?
Yes.
Because if you're not, that plays into everything else you do in your life.
Mhm.
Your work will suffer. Your recreation will suffer if you don't eat right.
Yeah.
You
Mental
know,
health as well, emotions.
Exactly. It all
Mhm.
feeds into one big picture.
Yep.
Right? All your pieces have to be together, otherwise it all falls apart.
Very true.
And unfortunately, that is extremely difficult to do. I'm not going to undermine it at all. I'm not going to tell you like, oh, if you just tried harder. No, that's not fair either. There are only so many hours in the day. And eventually you have to find the balance that works for you.
Mm.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, if you're not happy, you haven't found that balance, right? Nah, I can't even say that. Happiness is a terrible measurement. If you feel like if your life is out of balance,
Mhm.
okay, you need to probably do some soul searching and figure out what's out of whack,
Yeah.
right?
As I was doing one of those classes one day, like I had worked a full day and then taught 3 classes back to back. And I called you and I was like, how do you do this? And you were like, momentum.
Momentum. That's right.
Like just consistently. But I tell you what,
Was he cross? Keep
You're right.
I've got
I-
like, why do you guys keep coming back?
why do you want stuff?
Oh wait, I don't.
You want to defend yourself? Just buy a gun. Jesus. No, don't do that. But no, like, but one of those things that keeps you going has to be like that fulfillment. Like, what do you personally get from being able to teach all these different people from different walks of life, whether it is somebody who wants to be a professional fighter or just wants to have better confidence and all that? Like, do you get that from an overall, like from the whole team, or is it individually? Like when somebody says like, thanks coach for, how do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because what you get out of it, if you're a good instructor, is you
Which you are.
see the personal growth of your students
Mhm.
wherever they're at. It really doesn't matter,
Mhm.
right? And you see that moment that they realize that they're improving and growing.
Mhm.
And people's face light up the first time they do something like legitimately correct.
It's true.
We had a training session today, and a young man in here was grappling, and he managed to tap out his opponent with a Kimura from the guard.
Mhm.
And he was ecstatic because the first time he'd ever gotten a submission from the guard.
Mhm.
He's got a wrestling background. He didn't know how to fight on his back.
Mhm.
And so he's learning.
Yep.
And this is a big moment for him, and he was excited. That's special.
Mhm.
And you could take that and extrapolate it to all of the levels of skill level and such. We have one of the fighters that trains here, Mario, who I think you're going to interview, when he won his first pro debut match.
Yeah.
It was a huge thing.
For
And
sure.
seeing how excited he was, seeing that achievement on his face, those are the special moments.
Yeah.
Right? And those are two big extremes, right? One is one pulling off a technique for the first time ever,
Mhm.
and the other one is a professional fighter,
Right.
getting a paycheck.
Right.
Right? So, but you see stuff like that all the time, and that's really where it comes down to. But then also, forget the technical piece of it. There's also the emotional growth stuff too.
Mm.
We get a lot of people join martial arts for a lot of reasons.
Mhm.
And a lot of people join martial arts because they are afraid and insecure.
Just get my ass kicked.
Yep.
That's what got me in the
Yep.
martial arts.
Yeah.
And
I was
so,
like, no,
Yeah.
didn't learn.
Right.
exactly. Yeah, I started martial arts when I was very young because I was getting bullied very badly because I was a very small kid. And it is what it is. But in those cases, it's a little bit different when you see that personal growth, because it's not so much the technical aspect of it that's there, but it's when you see that confidence grow. When they've been training long enough and they're no longer, they're not flinching from everything, right? Like, no, they are relaxed in this environment and are being productive. They're doing work, right? That's a different thing that you'll see with people in the martial arts world that I think is unique to martial arts. Because I know on the list of questions you sent me, I saw one on there that was basically along the lines of, what do you think is a unique aspect of martial arts when it comes to just like general activity in life? And that's one of them.
Yeah.
I'll get slightly philosophical. So Shaolin and the Temple of Shaolin, right? They're pacifists, but they still practice Kung Fu.
They're passing that fist, all right.
All right. And yes, they did it a lot of times for self-defense and things like that. But if you look at the philosophy behind it, I don't practice Shaolin Kung Fu at all, but the philosophy behind it was fighting will expose you for who you really are. If you are a coward, you will learn that about yourself immediately when you actually have to step in front of somebody and throw hands, right? It will isolate your weaknesses immediately, whatever they may be. But that's a good thing, because if you know what your weaknesses are, if you know that you are afraid, if you know that you are out of shape, okay, well, guess what you need to be working on, right? Maybe you need to be working on your mental maturity, or what would be another phrase for that? Mental endurance. That's not quite right either. Fortitude.
Yeah.
There we go. Mental fortitude.
Emotional regulation.
Yep.
A lot of ego.
Ego is a big one.
Martial arts is not the ego out of me so many times.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times we get people who come in here and maybe they've done something else outside of martial arts where they were, they were it, man. I was the, a lineman at my high school football team. I'm big, strong.
Right.
I'm sure you are.
Out there.
And then you'll come in here, and the very first time we put on gloves and start going, you'll realize very quickly that there's a big difference between that and this. And as you say, it will check people's ego, which is a healthy thing. Not saying you shouldn't even have some ego in the sense that you should have self-confidence, right? You should believe in yourself. You should believe in your abilities, but you don't necessarily, it can't be too much, right? You don't want to start forcing that on the people around you, because that's not a healthy way to live.
Right.
Not to mention that it leads to conflict, which leads to fights, which leads to injuries, which leads to jail time. So yeah, absolutely. That's another aspect of it that I think is very unique in just the fight world in general. Is you will get checked very quickly.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is like with my current job, we're under a lot of stress. There's a lot of changes and all that. But the fact that I've been in the ring, the fact that I've been in these crazy training sessions helps me like regulate that for the office, because people get anxiety just at work. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's corporate or nonprofit, whatever that it is, people are often stressed by interactions with other people who are either trying to intimidate them if they're a manager or just like another colleague or whatever. It's like, hey, I've been punched in the face several times just in the past 24 hours. What you were saying is irrelevant. And that it also gives them the confidence to be able to move forward to, it's like a healthy conflict kind of thing. Like if you can do a lot of simulated fighting in a gym where it's controlled and you can walk away happier, that work stress doesn't matter as much. You know what I mean?
And that's one of the reasons that I do actually like the sport aspect of martial arts. Because we talk about, martial arts will expose you no matter what it is, whether it's a jiu-jitsu match, a judo match, a boxing match, Kudo, it doesn't matter. There is nothing quite so stressful as standing across from another man, knowing that he is fixing to try to tear you apart. Now, he may do it with love in his heart, but he is going to try to win this match, and you're in his way.
Right.
Well, once you've done that a few times, whether you win, lose, draw, it doesn't matter. you do become more acclimated to being in that position.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying you're not going to have an emotional reaction, because you for sure will. It is stressful every time.
Right.
If it's not stressful, you're a psychopath.
Right.
Because even like high level, top 1% fighters will talk about how they're throwing up in the changing room before they go out. Yeah. Mike Tyson, Iron Mike Tyson is crying in the changing room
Right.
because of the stress of the event. But at the end of the
he
day,
did say that he was crying because I'm going to hurt him.
well,
Psychopath.
but at the end of the day, those guys go out and they do work.
Right.
Whatever's going on inside, it's controlled. You go out and you execute the plan, right? And the ability to do that does carry over in your everyday life, because we're in stressful situations constantly. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's with your family. Maybe you end up in an 8-car pileup and some dude is yelling at you because because his car's damaged now.
Right.
Well, don't freak out, right? You got to deal with that stress, and you got to operate, right? You got to handle the situation, and exposing yourself to high stress situations in a controlled environment is a way to learn to adapt to that.
Yeah. So one thing we usually ask is, if at the end of everything, let's say tomorrow you knew that you were gonna, walk out that door and never see this place again, never see any of your students again, different things like that. For whatever reason, you're retiring and moving to a private island, because you made all the money teaching, because we all know there's so much money in teaching, so much. If you could size Porsche out there,
You betcha. You betcha.
But yeah,
2007 Toyota subcompact, baby. Yeah.
Big bucks.
Big bucks. Yeah.
baller. But yeah, so you're retiring with all the big bucks to a private island, no cell phone service, no internet. You're never going to see these people again. What would be the one thing, whether it be a new student or people you brought up who are teaching now, what would be the one message you leave behind you that you feel would help them progress in their, not just necessarily just training, but just life in general?
Well, we'll start with that scenario won't happen. And I only say that because martial arts is my life.
Yeah.
Like, it is a part of my life, and it will always be a part of my life. So while I may not be here in this physical location, it'll always be just somewhere else.
For sure.
Okay. Until the day I kick over, I'll be doing something.
Yeah.
Right. But I understand the point of view.
So not to make anybody panic, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
We did not pay him that much for this. Actually, we didn't pay him anything for this.
So I would say my biggest takeaway for people, especially if they are wanting to continue with this forever, it goes back to the ego thing. As you progress in martial arts and as you progress in life, life is cruel in the sense that no matter how good you get, no matter how good a fighter you get, it's going to degrade. Your health's going to degrade. Your mind's going to degrade. Your skills are going to degrade. We do everything in our power to slow that process down, but it's going to happen. Always keep in mind that concept of continuous self-improvement. No matter what happens, the idea is that you try to become better than you were the day before. Even if you're losing ground, you still try to become better than you were the day before. That effort can never stop, because the day you stop, then what was the point of all of that before then? Right? Did you waste your time? And just because you can't be number one, you quit? What was the point? Because at the end of the day, there's always someone bigger, stronger, faster. Right? Even guys who are at the top of the world, you're there for a day. Right?
Nice.
Because now you're here and now you're everybody's target. Right? They're going to take you out. It's going to happen. Happens to everybody. Regardless of what your opinion may be about the whole Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight that just happened. Whether he was a fixed fight or not, I have my opinions. It's still a harsh reality. The Mike Tyson we saw that day is not Iron Mike Tyson that we saw when he was in his 20s. Okay. Even someone at that level who was just the world's best boxer, there's still degradation. Life's a bitch.
he had major health issues
Yeah.
like months before.
Yeah, he was
And he-
hospitalized
yeah.
before they had the first date set for that match.
Yeah, for sure. So it's like, and like, yeah, that's just the perfect example of, you know, the world knew you as this. There was no question. And now you are not the same person you were 20, 30, 50 years ago.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. But at the same time, he still put in the work.
Oh, for
he
sure.
trained, and
For
he
sure.
got he was the best version of Mike Tyson he could be the day of that match.
Mm.
He's never going to get back to his 20s.
Yeah.
But that day, it was the best he could be that day.
Mm.
That's the mentality you have to carry for your entire life.
Facts. Bars. Man, we appreciate it so much, man. Thank you so much. So, guys, definitely gotta love that instructor, that instructor-student relationship. Gotta love it. I love seeing it from the outside.
Hell, when I get back, are you?
Where have you been?
Yeah.
I just saw you yesterday. Well, guys, man, this has been an amazing interview. Our second episode of At the Feet of Masters. You know, definitely appreciate you, you know, giving us that peek inside of the instructor's mind. I don't think and that's why we're doing this. A lot of people don't get a chance to actually sit down and talk to somebody who is living this martial arts life. You know, you see a lot of people, Instagram, MMA, movies, different things like that, who are living their version of the life, but you don't see somebody who's dedicated themselves to coming in every day, teaching people, helping them improve, showing them where they're strong, showing them, you know, helping them improve where they're weak, and doing these different things day in and day out on a regular basis, and actually living that day-to-day life. It's not something a lot of people experience, and not something a lot of guys now, unfortunately, have the chance to have influence in. So greatly appreciate it. Guys, definitely check out Iron Forge if you're here in Colorado Springs. Amazing place. What all do you guys teach here, by the way?
Everything.
Yes. So
including ballet, apparently. That'll be Edmund will be teaching the ballet class.
Yeah. Look at him. He looks like a ballerina. So we have, of course, the Kudo class we've already talked about. We have Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. We have Kyokushin Karate, excellent Kyokushin instructor here as well, Sensei Bernard Adelan. We have Scottish Regimental Broadsword if you'd like to fence. We have some Kenjutsu classes for Japanese-style weapon work. We have a little bit of everything. We even got a Kung Fu program here with an instructor that does a really good job. Yeah.
Very
A
awesome.
little something for everybody.
Awesome. That's what's up. Where can they find you?
Check out our website, www.ironforgemartialarts.com.
There you go, man. And where you can find us, you'll find this episode on our YouTube channel for our podcast. Also Spotify, see us on our Apple Music, Amazon, all those places where you can find podcasts. Also our Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn here pretty soon, Facebook, all the places.
LinkedIn, new job.
Always. Because then it still doesn't pay me for this shit. Keep saying the check's in the mail, but I'm starting to get the feeling he's lying to me. But no, yeah, definitely check us out. We also have a new course that we just dropped. It's called 8 Inner Gates. Basically a 8-step course on how to introduce the principles of the Bushido into modern day life and set a foundation for us as men to move. You know, develop a code of honor, develop your relationships, your career, your business, your life in general, and just how to move as a man to set up that code of honor to actually show you and guide you in becoming that modern day warrior. So definitely check that out. We'll have that linked in the description, and we will see you guys next time. And one thing we always say, whether we're here or we're abroad or we're in our online, is you much rather be a warrior in a garden
than a garden in a war. Check you guys next time.